Hello, my name is Jim Bradley. I am the faculty sponsor of the College DePage Math Club, providing a preamble for a video chat with a young mathematician. By way of introduction, once upon a time, a teenage student at a military academy, Franz Capus, corresponded with a popular author and poet, seeking advice on the quality of his poetry and in deciding between a literary career or a military career. In the first reply letter, the great poet named Rainier Rilke declines to review or criticize the poetry and advises that nobody can advise you and help you. Nobody. There's only one way. Go into yourself. But in 10 subsequent letters, the great author offered advice on how a poet should feel, love, and seek truth in trying to understand and experience the world around them and engage in the world of art. In 1929, after the great author perished, his student, Capus, published a volume called Letters to a Young Poet. It's very rich reading, and I offer one more quote from these letters. Perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act, just once, with beauty and courage. Perhaps everything that frightens us is, in its deepest essence, something that helplessly wants our love. Fast forward to the 21st century, John Donatich, who was then a president of an outfit called Basic Books, but now is the director of Yale University Press, sponsored an Art of Mentorship series, and the titles were Letters to Young, and you can see Letters to a Young Lawyer by Alan Dershowitz, Letters to a Young Gymnast by Nadia Comaneci, and Letters to a Young Mathematician by Ian Stewart. Now, this Ian Stewart is not the keyboard artist who was with the Rolling Stones, but a member of the in fact, he's a fellow of the Royal Society, very accomplished mathematician, currently associated with University of Warwick, and he wrote Letters to a Young Mathematician, where a hypothetical niece named Meg was his subject of the letters, and he offered much advice. So in this honored tradition, I offer you a 2021 COD Math Club work product, a chat with a young mathematician. Linda Shaw interviews Jack Wagner. Take it away, Linda.
So we should be recording now.
This meeting is being recorded. Yes, I just got
All
a
right.
notification.
Fantastic. So first of all, we are doing this over Zoom. So what city are you in right now?
So I live in Brooklyn, New York City, and I work in downtown Manhattan.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
I'm sure there's a lot to do out there. So what are you doing for fun lately?
So I play video games and I read, and I also certainly make use of living in, the Big Apple, living in the city. I
Okay.
wander around and listen to podcasts and lots of restauranting,
Okay.
trying new food and trying new cuisines and that sort of thing.
What would you say your favorite video game is?
My favorite video game. Let's go with the Halo series.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, I like to say that I play video games, but I'm really just more of a Candy Crusher. So
Gotcha.
now you actually grew up around here though, right? Like out in
Yes.
DuPage County.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So where did you go to high school?
I went to high school at Glenbard South, right there in Glen Ellen
Yeah,
on
like right down the
Butterfield
road from
Road.
COD.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And then where did you end up going to college?
I went to um, two schools. First, for undergrad, I went to University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. That's where I studied actuarial science. That was my major. And I had a minor in math and a minor in business, which is very kind of redundant because actuarial science is very much kind of applied math for business purposes. But, I did
So
what I
what
could.
would you say the difference is?
What would I say the difference is?
Yeah, between getting a major in actuarial science or a major in business.
Oh, the difference between those two is very much topical, very much what we're talking about here. It's the actuarial one is so much more math and statistics focused, much more intensive that way. I think a business major, you're or at least in my experience, or what I remember was, maybe the most you're doing is calculus, and then some kind of classes regarding business calc as it relates to investments and things like that. But with the actuarial degree, it was much more on top of that, I would say.
So what you're saying is people who major in business don't need to know trigonometry, but you do.
yeah, more or less.
Okay. So what math classes did you actually end up taking in college?
Yeah, so
Loaded
there's a
question,
lot.
right?
I most of my courses were very much in preparation for the actuarial exams. I don't know how much you know about those,
Why don't you
but
tell us about them?
sure. So in the actuarial kind of career path and how it all works, or maybe I've been a little bit distanced from it for a number of years now, but this is how it all kind of works. Is you take exams. I think it was 5 whenever I was an undergrad, preliminary exams, and each one is kind of working towards accreditation. And each of them are, I want to say, about 3 hours long, and you're expected to study for hundreds of hours and things like
Now,
that.
do you
And
take these all at once, or are they spread out among the years that you're in college?
very much spread out, and
Okay.
no one is expected to have them all done whenever they're done with undergrad.
Really?
I was fairly satisfied with my 2 exams under my belt whenever I graduated. Some people stretch it to 3, but actually, actuarial science, and as a career, there's kind of I'll say a cool expectation that once you graduate and you kind of start this job, your employer will often give you study time, give you study materials, pay for your exams, and kind of invest in you to take more of those tests and pass more of those tests, and your salary will kind of increase with that, and
Okay.
until you're accredited, and then you kind of get the exciting experience of taking more exams to go from just an associate to, I believe it's a fellow, and then those exams get a little bit more specialized towards kind of what you're working on. Life insurance as compared to maybe auto insurance, or casualty is what it's called.
Okay.
So yeah, so back to your original question, my classes kind of more or less aligned with each of those exams. Like there at the time, at least, there was an exam called financial mathematics, and so that was kind of the math and calculations and kind of work involved in knowing like how much I need to invest now to have X sum later on and things like that. And then there was a test around probability, a test around life expectancy was another one, but otherwise lots of statistics, and that was kind of certainly like the actuarial side of things. And then for my math minor, there were other things like discrete math and
Gotcha. But those didn't
just
count towards like the actuary stuff?
Correct. Less important
Okay.
for kind of those purposes, and more of a those classes were honestly a little bit more of like a for my own pleasure sort of thing, kind of
Okay.
things that I was interested in.
Yeah, I know when I went to Benedictine, which is actually right down the road from here in Lisle, then there were quite a few people who were majoring in actuarial science, but they were taking like real analysis, things like that. Like, gosh, I'm blanking on so many classes right now, but I know, right? Like right when you need to remember something, that's when it disappears. But they're very proof-based math classes. So I was curious if that was something that you ended up having to take for that program, or if that was more just for the math minor.
Uh, I would say that was very much, I did take those kinds of classes, and that was very much more for the math minor. I did, I don't think that there was a requirement for me to, take a couple of those, except for the minor.
Yeah,
So,
so if somebody like absolutely hates proofs, then they can still get their degree in actuarial science, is what you're saying.
yeah, I don't want to overgeneralize, but yeah, that's certainly my impression.
Okay. So what other technical courses did you end up taking in college aside from math?
Sorry, I'm losing your audio just a little bit.
So what other technical courses did you end up taking in college?
Oh, yeah, of course. So, well, actually, just to kind of clarify, earlier I was talking about how I did my undergrad at UIUC in actuarial science. After that, I went on to graduate school at University of Chicago, and that's where I did a master's in analytics, is what it was called, but it's really data science.
Okay.
And both whenever I was at UIUC and then especially at U Chicago, the other kind of technical courses were certainly revolved around computer science and programming, and so those were certainly kind of like the other side of my majors and my masters. So things like learning database management and programming languages like SQL and Spark and Python, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So
Okay.
that was definitely like the other big thing. Oh, actually, and while I'm thinking about it, the for actuarial science, like I was saying before, there's a need. It is very much a like math heavy subject, but it's all about like application towards real world problems, and particularly has a lot to do with finance and kind of like business math. So I was also taking a number of courses that were all about financial mechanisms, calls and puts, options, stocks, and all of that stuff. So that also had its share of kind of like technical things and pieces that I needed to also study.
Yeah, it sounds incredibly intense. Which course would you say was your favorite?
My favorite course. My favorite course was actually my freshman year, first semester, one of my very first courses, and that was Calc 3. Calc 3
Really?
was a ton of fun. It was just really getting into the kind of it was before things became, the actuarial problems that became like grounded use cases for like business opportunities and things like that. Calc 3 was kind of one of the last math classes I had where it was, solve this math problem for the sake of solving this math problem. Solve for X and things like that. And
Yeah.
I always found that to be kind of, oh man, this is very dorky, but a ton of fun. So that's kind of I think that was my favorite course.
So is that what made you realize that you just love math, or was it something else along the way? What made you realize you had the passion for it?
Yeah, my simple answer is I was good at it and got good grades, finished tests fast and things like that. But it genuinely was this thing where I found it enjoyable. I found it fun, kind of like what I was saying, like, I use the phrase find X, but it's
puzzle
every
solving.
problem was a little puzzle, and it was kind of it was a delight to solve for, and kind of work that I guess work that part of my brain or whatnot. So yeah, that's definitely what I tend to think about whenever I think about why I am where I am, or like how I kind of started this trajectory.
Okay. So then why actuarial science? Why not go into pure math or some kind of research where you'd be solving puzzles like that?
The high school me, the me before any kind of undergrad or college for that matter, it was kind of described to me as, hey, you like math, look at this program, you get to take math tests, and every time you pass one of these math tests you get paid more. And it was like, okay, this is a win-win. I get to keep doing what I'm doing. And I think there's some truth to that. But then whenever I was actually studying it, and once I was in my undergrad, that sort of thing, it became it was clear that I genuinely did kind of get to keep doing what I was doing. There's I mentioned financial mathematics before. It's very much the same thing, or like one of the main things this is another place where I hope I'm not overgeneralizing, but any actuary, it's kind of this idea of how much money do I need to invest today to know, to be able to pay out some even like unknown figure sometime into the future, given these people's risk profiles. So it's still like find X, and which is always going to be like my I guess a driver for me. So started out as like hey, this seems like a good career, like a career path that someone who likes math could pursue. And then it became something where I was like, oh yeah, I'm on board with this. This is still fun, and I can keep rolling with it.
Okay, awesome. Now, when you were in your did you end up doing like an internship or something? I know you had mentioned previously that you start working somewhere and your employer kind of invests in you and they pay for you to take these tests. But did you sign up for an internship or anything like that?
Yes. So I actually did not ever have an internship during my undergrad. The closest thing I had was a kind of a smaller research job, working with a professor and a couple other students for maybe, I think that was about 2 semesters or so. And then it actually wasn't until I was in grad school that I took on an internship over the course of a summer. And actually, that internship did follow into my current career. So I kind of stayed on, or I came back full time. Um, that is, yeah, that was back in, I believe, 2017, and then I returned soon after.
Okay, awesome. So you did actually end up finding some kind of internship and it did eventually lead to a job.
Yes, yes.
Um, so personally, for my career path, then I found that mentors have been a huge asset, something that cannot be overlooked in any way, shape, or form. I mean, even Professor Bradley, the professor who introduced us and who's actually sponsoring Math Club, then he has been a huge guide for me while I try to figure out what I wanted to do. So, what mentors have made the most difference for you? How did you meet them? Who are they to you? That kind of deal.
I definitely had my fair share of professors. I can think of one in particular that was very was very good about, I wasn't maybe I wasn't picked out, but he definitely invested time in a lot of his students, and made sure that we were on like a good trajectory, that we were learning the things we needed to learn, and that we were kind of getting the right exposure and experience and things like that, telling it how it is, and all of that stuff. Um, he was also the professor that kind of sponsored the research job I had, so I worked with him a little bit more closely that way. So professors certainly played a role, and I mentored me and made sure I was prepared for the real world. But I would say that more so my mentorship, or me as a mentee, came by way of different managers that I've had, both at my job before I ever even kind of even my summer job during college. I would say I was getting mentored by my supervisor at the time, and which was not a job that required a math degree whatsoever. I was doing kind of landscaping work and things like that. But I would say that my supervisor at that time kind of taught me things about responsibility and time management and things like that. But then it was really during my internship, and then whenever I first started my like full-time career, I had a wonderful supervisor, who was a great mentor to me, who took the time to teach me, had patience to teach me about data science subjects, as well as kind of things that are important to healthcare and health insurance, which is kind of where I work now. And very much a person who I aspire to be like, especially with maybe a new hire, or an intern that we have now and things like that. So a lot of my mentorship came from my kind of supervisors and managers at my current job, who invested time into making sure I'm again learning the things I need to learn, working on projects that excite me and keep me interested, and making sure that we're kind of making a meaningful difference. Yeah, that was a long-winded explanation.
So what kind of personality traits would you say are most important in the mentors that you've picked for yourself? Like before you decide to take their advice on what you want to do with your life, then what do you mentally decide they should be like? Because for me personally, then it was always, I wanted to listen to someone who genuinely cares about their students. And as long as they cared about their students, then the rest of it didn't really matter to me. I just wanted somebody who definitely had that sense of empathy and would accommodate people and wasn't that cut and dry, if you didn't turn in your assignment on time, then you get an F kind of deal. Like I wanted somebody who definitely cared enough to go that extra mile. So what would you say is most important to you?
The very first thing that occurs to me, um, uh, empathy. I would say empathy is like a wonderful thing. I would agree with that. But actually, the very first thing that occurs to me is someone who is very, very, I'll use the word honest, or maybe this sounds strange, but grounded in reality. But someone who I don't know, doesn't beat around the bush, and is able to kind of yeah, empathize and listen to kind of my experience and my thinking, and then be able to either agree with it, or have some good discourse and be able to maybe even say why I'm wrong, or or easily explain maybe where we should be at in a project, or what expectations would be. Someone who's very very I don't know, straightforward and able to relay the kind of information that I need to hear, or the kind of guidance and advice that I need to hear at a given point in time to kind of um, proceed on a project, or help me on my career path, and to better understand like what I'm doing poorly, or what I need to be doing better, or what I'm doing well, for that matter, and just kind of um, someone who's able to kind of at a point in time tell tell it how it is, and just kind of
So really what you're looking for is just someone who can give you honest feedback.
honest feedback. Yes, you've made a much more succinct
Maybe
answer, but
somebody who's
yes.
not gonna like crack the whip, but will tell you where you're wrong and be honest with you that you are wrong and tell you how to improve.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So you did mention before that you did go to graduate school, but what would you say motivated that decision? Aside from wanting to just move up the ranks in your company, was there anything else behind that? Because graduate school is quite a bit of work.
Yes. Yeah. So I'd be lying if I said it wasn't because I didn't have a job coming out of undergrad. That was a motivator at the time. I graduated from UIUC and had great grades and that sort of thing, but I hadn't had an internship and I didn't have a job lined up. Um, and actually at the time I also met a data scientist who got me very interested, and so I made this decision to go straight to grad school, which I almost say that I was lucky that it worked out. I think if I could do it again, I would have worked harder on kind of finding that first job and making sure I had that experience, because I think I missed out a little bit on starting a career before making that decision to go to grad school. And if I could do it again, I would have like I said, worked harder to find a job, and then thought about grad school as like a part-time thing, or at least had a more informed decision of, okay, now I want to do this. But um, that was yeah. So short answer is I was motivated, I guess, by not having a job and not necessarily having a clear path forward, and so I went to grad school.
I mean, if it makes you feel any better, then I did roughly the same thing. I actually have a running joke with some of my professors that the best way to avoid student loans is just stay
I
at school.
think your audio is going out just a little bit again.
So I have a running joke with some professors that the best way to avoid your student loans is to just stay a student.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Because then you never have to pay them back. So aside from not having a job, was there any point in time when you were in graduate school that you thought, maybe this isn't for me?
I would say I knew it was for me. I felt good about my decision, certainly once I was in it, and I was kind of continuing to study the things I was interested in, and even studying new things that particularly the programming side of things is something I was less involved in my undergrad. The most we did in my undergrad in actuarial science was like using R to model things, and then I got to do some more exciting things in graduate school. But one thing I would say is that I came to realize that I was a little bit out of my depth a little bit, particularly just on the experience side of things, working with my peers who hadn't done what I did. I was certainly kind of in the minority there of fresh out of undergrad, young guy in grad school, kind of studying with a lot of people who were much further along in their careers, who were doing it part-time and doing it a little bit slower than me. I was doing it full-time. And I recognized that I was missing kind of that career experience, that real world experience. And because I'd only ever really been in the classroom. And that was pretty eye-opening. And that was kind of what drives me to think that, like, if I could do it again, I would have, done it a little differently.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think it kind of worked out, but working with those folks, who are, often older than me and more experience, I realize I was missing that life experience, I would say.
So then how would you say that you compensated for that then? Since everyone around you has all this life experience, maybe they have jobs outside of grad school as well. What did you do to kind of keep yourself at the same level?
It was tough. Part of me just kind of, I would say, devoted myself to more studying, which is kind of the wrong direction in that way. But on the other side of things, it became a big help and a big part of my education there were the big group projects where I was working with these other people, where I was kind of helping in a larger effort, because I did get an opportunity to learn from them and to kind of understand, get a little bit of that exposure of the difference between a classroom test compared to like a real life business opportunity, a business problem, something to actually kind of tackle. And it was all still inside kind of the school's walls and things like that. But interacting and working with those people was an education opportunity in and of itself. So that's kind of that's how I'd answer that.
Now, you did mention that you had kind of an internship at the end of your graduate studies where you were working with the organization that you're currently at. So how difficult was it to transition from that internship sort of deal to the paid position where you're actually hired?
The transition itself, I would use the word easy, but that might oversimplify things. The internship was certainly less work, and it was to some extent more exciting work. They kind of gave us maybe the more fun or interesting projects to some extent. But transitioning to a full-time job, it was very much something where it was gradual. It was still this expectation that I have a lot to learn, and an expectation that it would take time for me to ramp up and things like that. But it was just this whole idea of, let's give Jack more responsibility, more opportunities, more work, but kind of do it gradually, and kind of let him ramp up to where I am now, I suppose. So all things considered, a pretty easy transition.
Now, do you think most companies have that kind of mindset of, this person was just hired, so they still have a lot to learn? Or do you think a lot of companies just kind of expect people to hit the ground running, and yours is just unique in that sense?
I can't totally, I guess I wouldn't know. I haven't worked in enough places, but I would hope that most companies are like what I described. I
Well,
can
just from
speak
what you've heard
to,
from peers as well.
well, yeah, well, I would just say, I would say, even a lead data scientist who joins our company today, they're not expected to know everything. particularly about the kind of specialized environment that we live in, in terms of health insurance, healthcare, how the giant, complicated thing that healthcare in the United States is. No one's expected to know those things, and it takes everyone 3+ months to like ramp up and understand, what the heck I've been talking about for 4 years now. So I, with that in mind, I would, I guess this is me being overly optimistic or hopeful potentially, but I would think that many companies, mine in particular, don't have an expectation of you can hit the ground running, you can immediately make the best predictive model of all time. It's very much like there's an onboarding period, and it's more about having the right thought process, and the openness to learn, I guess, is the bigger deal than already being the expert.
I do think that's something that's a little bit more unique to our generation. I feel like with previous generations, then they really have expected people to kind of come in and already have ideas, already have things that they can do from day one. Whereas with us, then it's more so, okay, well, you have to learn this, that, and the other thing. You got to kind of get used to the workplace climate, that kind of deal. So I do think that our generation is being a little bit more lax, and the hiring is more so based about who you are as a person, because skills can be taught, but personality traits can't be changed. That's at least my opinion.
No, yeah, I think I'd agree with that.
Okay. So what would you do just day to day? Describe a day in the life.
A day in the life. It changes a decent amount depending on what I'm working on, or what stage we're in. Maybe I'll the very simplified description of my day would be, I have meetings across my team, but also with stakeholders. Often the projects that I'm working on are really on the behalf of someone else in the company, someone who's not a data scientist, someone who's not, someone who is an actuary, perhaps, that sort of thing. So there's certainly meetings, which are all remote these days, but kind of checking in with my team, my fellow data scientists, my manager, the stakeholders, and then the rest of the time is more, a large amount of my time is spent doing something kind of generally called data wrangling, and just kind of data management work in general, which is going in and pulling the information that I care about for a given problem, pulling the data that I care about for a given problem, making sure it's in a form that I can use, kind of getting into maybe some like feature engineering if I'm preparing for like a model. But a large chunk of my time is spent doing what's called SQL querying, which just like I said, it's, can I pull the information I need for a given problem, even if it's just for some kind of like reporting activity? Or can I pull the information and put it into a form that I can later model to solve a business problem, or create a predictive model, that sort of thing. Then like the smaller chunk of my time, which is not something that I do every day, is actually kind of more of the fun stuff, and that is the actual modeling, the
solving for X.
prediction, the solving for X, exactly. Yes. So that's that. There's a lot of work to get to that point, and that's what I spend, I'll say, most of my time doing, and then getting to do the fun thing. then I'm still kind of just generalizing, but there is this other chunk of my day, which is building PowerPoint decks. And that is all this idea of, hey, I've done all of this great work. Hey, I've pulled this data and I have this cool information that I know of because I've done this, like, I'll say hard work. But now I need to be able to relay that to maybe my team, maybe my manager, but more importantly to the stakeholders that I'm working with. And then I can kind of tell them, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Is this what you expect? Or alternatively, hey, there's this thing I'm finding, or I'm able to predict this to this much accuracy. Is this something that you can use, or maybe we need to keep iterating? Or there's all kinds of conversations that I can have, but I need to be able to relay that in maybe an email, but oftentimes a PowerPoint deck that's kind of clear and kind of gets the information across.
Okay. So do you feel like your college experience, and let's say before graduate school, just so we kind of have an idea of where the students that we're actually talking to are at right now, do you feel like what you learned in college adequately prepared you for the real world, let's say? Like, I know you said you had some trouble with the job search immediately after graduating, but do you think it was just bad luck at the beginning, or do you think it was, maybe just more time needs to go into it?
So,
or is it really just impossible to get a full-time job out of college with only a math degree?
It is very possible to get a job out of undergrad with a actuarial science or I'll say math major. I would argue that I'm going to give kind of two answers that contradict each other just a little bit.
Great.
But
Love it.
I would say that my undergraduate schooling, much to what I was talking about before, did not fully prepare me for, let's say like a first job, because there's always going to be so much more to learn on the job and in like a specialty or for a particular subject that no one is ready right out the gate, or at least that is my impression. So there's all that onboarding that has to happen, and the integrals I was solving for in Calc 3 did not prepare me for, like X job or whatever. But with that being said, my undergrad, my schooling certainly prepared me for, in terms of the kind of critical thinking, the
time management, that kind of
management,
deal.
And exercising the kinds of technical things that I needed to learn. I mean, not solving for integrals necessarily, but I certainly need to solve for X. But the it had me thinking the right way, I'll say, and it had me prepared that way. So I was ready to learn more and like kind of start my career that way. And also more concretely, I was certainly learning the things I needed to learn to take those actuarial exams. And had I continued on that trajectory, that to be an actuary, I was certainly like prepared to take more of those exams and study for more of those exams. And it was certainly, it set me up for success, I'll say.
So what would you have done differently that you feel would have prepared you more for your job search, for working at your company that you're at right now? Just in general, what do you think you could have done differently to get the most out of your undergraduate experience?
The not so fun answer is I should have gotten an internship. I mean, that's that first step into like real world applications and kind of learning from people who have full-time careers and learning from people who've been in it for, you know, X years and things like that. And you know, that was something that I got to do for graduate school, but it's not something I managed in undergrad. But you know, obviously, I recognize that that doesn't always happen, myself included. So, kind of with that in mind, I would argue that there is an opportunity, even without an internship, to kind of learn from those people, learn from the career actuaries. I guess I don't necessarily know what mechanism there would be to reach out to them directly and who would necessarily answer. But you know, just like what I was saying, whenever I was in graduate school and I was working with these people who've had that experience, who've you know, I keep saying out in the real world, but you know, they've
You know,
any
not the fake
opportunity
world,
to
but the real
expose
world.
yourself to kind of more folks who maybe aren't in the classroom, that aren't your professor, I think that's a valuable opportunity. Yeah, think that's what I maybe would have tried to do or worked on more.
So what are your current career goals? What are you hoping to do next?
Um, my generic answers, but my very honest answers is continue to learn and improve my skills.
Just keep kicking butt.
Yeah, exactly. There's the, you know, building the better model side of things and being the more technical person, but there's kind of the other end of things, which maybe we haven't talked about as much, but something that I can personally work on more is actually more of the relationship management and how to work with those stakeholders and how to communicate progress and roadblocks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a whole other side of you know, getting to do the fun things and getting to work with numbers is great, but you know, to really
Can't underestimate those
flourish.
interpersonal skills.
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
don't know how to talk to people, then it doesn't matter how good you are with math, because if you can't communicate it, you're out of luck.
Yes, exactly.
So then, if you could write a letter to yourself, give yourself some advice back in the day, then what advice would you give yourself as a freshman? Or just any students who like math? What would you tell them?
I would so my first thought is, hey, keep at it. You know, if you think it's fun, then you're kind of doing the right thing. You know, if it's fun now, then you ought to be able to find kind of appreciation for your future career. You know, it's kind of become apparent to me that enjoying math is a relatively rare characteristic. So it's very much appreciated in kind of the business world, the real world.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you tell someone that you do math, then first response is, I
I
hate
hate
math.
math. Exactly. Yeah. There's that and the comment of, oh, the most math I ever do is like calculating the tip or whatever. And it's like,
Yeah.
yep, okay. So yeah, I'm very much a proponent for studying math and getting to solve for X, all that good stuff. Then my kind of like a little bit like more, I guess, grounded advice would be, especially to myself, would be I would stress that it's important to bridge out and kind of otherwise gain life experience. Um, I I graduated, I think, summa cum laude, and have my name emblazoned somewhere at UIUC because I had great grades. But even so, I didn't have a job.
I mean,
So
grades don't account for much when you don't have the experience to back it up, right?
Exactly. So, I had focused a lot on my schooling, but I think I had kind of missed out on some, to some extent, but kind of missed out on some maybe life experiences, and maybe was worse off for it. So I would tell my freshman self to care at least a little bit less about grades, and push myself to kind of get a little bit more involved otherwise. If that's like, get involved in extracurriculars, as cliche as it sounds. But
Unexpected advice from a mathematician. Give up the grades, pick up sports.
yeah, exactly. um, and and then the other advice I would give myself is study more for my first actuarial exam, because I did not pass. So that's my other helpful tip to myself. But yeah, that's the gist of it. Kind of grades are one thing, but I can even speak to like the kind of resumes that I read now for maybe interns and new hires and things like that. And my eyes go straight past the like GPA, because no one cares anymore.
I mean, I think that's another thing that our generation has kind of given up on, because grades really do not dictate how much you actually learned, how much you retained, what you can really bring to the table. All it says is I can study and I can get the grade on a test that I need to get.
Exactly.
So, I mean, if you want someone who can memorize things for a month, pick me. But yeah, experience is definitely much more of a factor than a lot of people believe it to be.
Yeah.
I mean,
agree.
even with the people that I interview for becoming peer tutors in the Learning Commons, then, I mean, one of my first questions to them is, do you have any education experience? Because even just a little bit of experience can go a very long way in getting yourself set up and established and figuring out what you need to do next.
Exactly.
Okay. Any final thoughts?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, then thank you so much for this time and for letting me interview you. And I'm sure everyone at the COD Math Club will very much appreciate this. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for interviewing me.
All right.